The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
I welcome you to SAMR and the Next Gen Science Standards Happy Together. I'm Brad Curry. You can learn more about me by visiting www.bradcurry.net. You can email me at brad.curry@gmail.com for more information. A little bit about me. I am a former coach, teacher, currently a school administrator for the Chester Township School District in Chester, New Jersey. Been an educator for about 15 years now. And I am the founding partner of Evolving Educators, LLC. I am also the SatChat co-founder and co-moderator. SatChat is a weekly Twitter discussion for current and emerging school leaders every Saturday morning at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. So definitely try to hop onto Twitter and join the conversation. Each week we talk about different topics related to the world of education. I am the author of 3 books. My first book came out a few years ago. It's All Hands on Deck, Tools for Connecting Educators, Parents, and Communities. Personalized PD, Flipping Your Professional Development, and the newly released 140 Twitter Tips for Educators. You can find all 3 on Amazon.com. I am a Google certified trainer, presenter, and consultant. So for the next 35 minutes, we will get into the next generation science standards and how they relate to educational technology. And then we'll give you some time for some questions if you have any. The outline for today, you're going to be able to understand key concepts related to the next generation science standards. You're going to learn how the National Technology Plan impacts the next generation science standards. You will understand the importance of the SAMR model in relation to the next generation science standards. And you'll gain exposure to next generation science standard resources that address innovation and differentiation. You'll also learn how the next generation science standards meshes with other subject areas through an ed tech lens. Please keep in mind that this is the first of 4 webinars that Rider University will offer this month. All 4 I will host and kind of put a different spin on the next generation science standards. Some key points about the next generation science standards. 17 states have adopted the standards. There's a need for new standards that stimulate and build interest in STEM. The standards or performance expectations indicate what students should be able to do at the conclusion of instruction. We need to remember that the next generation science standards is not a curriculum, and schools must develop curriculum based on the standards. So my hope is that you will be able to come away with some curriculum resources and ideas to kind of help you navigate through the next generation science standards and really try to impact student success. It's really about knowledge and use, really about students not only having the knowledge in their brains, but also being able to apply that knowledge through hands-on experiences and making the learning of science relevant and engaging at all times. There is a focus on STEM, and there's cross-cutting concepts, links between earth science, biology, physics, chemistry, life science, all the different types of sciences, trying to link those at all times. Grade 6 through 12 implementation will be this upcoming school year, 16-17, and K5 implementation will be 17-18. So let's get into this here. Let's take a look at the SAMR model. Many of you are probably wondering, what is the SAMR model? What does it stand for? What is it all about? developed by Dr. Ruben Putadora, and its main purpose is to help teachers evaluate how they are integrating technology. And what you see here on your screen is a image that kind of clarifies, explains what the SAMR model is all about, what the different letters mean, and all those sorts of things. And we see here as we move from the bottom to the top of the image here of this SAMR model, you move from enhancement of learning experiences to really transforming learning experiences. At the bottom is substitution. All right, and to clarify here, there's nothing wrong with any of these levels within the SAMR model. It's just trying to break down for the educator, what technology integration can look like as you really kind of push yourself and your students and challenge yourself and your students at various levels. And so you have the substitution model here at the bottom. And basically, what this is saying is that technology acts as a direct tool substitute with no functional change. And we'll get into that in a moment. And then as you move up, you have augmentation, where technology acts as a direct tool substitute with functional improvement. And then we move on up to modification, where tech allows for significant task redesign. And then finally, redefinition, the R in the SAMR model, tech allows for the creation of new tasks previously inconceivable. So let's get into substitution here, where tech acts as a direct tool substitute with no functional change. Again, nothing wrong with this, but it is something to really think about and to understand through these examples that I'm about to show you. All right, so let's get into substitution here. What does it look like if I'm a teacher preparing for a lesson, preparing for a unit of study, and wanting to have my students, try to make sense of their learning through technology, and maybe like in the simplest form. All right, and if you're looking at it from a science standpoint, students will be taking notes, right? Because a main part of the next generation science standards is for students to acquire meaningful knowledge, useful knowledge. All right, and often students will take notes with pen and paper or pencil and paper. All right, but from an ed tech perspective, as we look at substitution, students, instead of taking notes with pen or paper or pencil or paper, they're going to take notes on a word processor like Google Docs, Microsoft Word, Apple Pages, those sorts of things. All right, so they're still taking notes, but they're using their device. Maybe they're on a Chromebook, or they're on an iPad, or a MacBook Air, or maybe even their cell phone or Android tablet. Okay, there's nothing wrong with it. I think as educators, we need to be supportive of the way students want to be able to make sense of their learning and take notes. Right? So I think it's really important that we keep that in mind. And so we need to be able to differentiate the way students are able to jot down their knowledge. Maybe they are taking notes, or maybe they're on a tool like Google Draw, or even within Google Docs or Microsoft Word, they're creating graphic organizers. Okay, these are things that are very useful to students that help them make sense of their learning of science or any subject matter. And I think it's important that we provide them those opportunities. I think the autonomy, students appreciate autonomy, they appreciate options, and even at the most simplest level, like substitution, taking notes, I think we need to be flexible and give them options. Maybe they can take notes in an outline form. Maybe they can take notes using different graphical organizers, or maybe they want to take notes in a different way. Maybe writing isn't for them for one reason or the other, and they want to voice record notes or or something along those lines. Continuing our look here at substitution, the teacher may have notes either by way of Google Docs or Microsoft Word, or maybe on a PowerPoint presentation or a Google slide presentation. It's a good practice to have a copy of those notes, particularly for those students that struggle, just to help them clarify the notes they take as they prepare for different assessments and projects. Lab reports are a big part of science classes. And again, looking at the next generation science standard, that knowledge component and putting that knowledge, applying that knowledge, really important as they make sense of different experiments and things in their labs. Having a lab report on a Google Doc or on a Microsoft Word, it may be a way to kind of switch things up a little bit. But I also think it's important to have that balance. I think students need to have the balance and the option to, all right, they want to write, they can write. If they want to take notes, they can take notes on Google Doc. I think they need to have those options. But again, this is a webinar on ed tech and next generation science standards. So I think we really need to focus on the technology part of this. Looking at do nows and exit slips, these sorts of things can be done through Google Docs or Microsoft Word or Google Forms, those sorts of things. So as students enter the room, their procedure is to, all right, now class, we're going to go on to this Google Doc. I need you to hop onto Google Docs and tell me, what it is you learned from last night's homework for this lesson on biology or DNA or whatever it is that you're studying in science at that point in time. The same thing can be said for the exit slip and using these different tools for that as well. And primary source documents, these are important features of any curriculum. Having these documents available to students on their devices through PDFs or Google Docs or Microsoft Word, or even Google Classroom. Those of you who are in Google Apps for Education districts, I think it's really important at this substitution level that students have access to those documents with a few clicks of the mouse or taps of the screen. All right, so this is what substitution is all about. Now we're going to make our way up to augmentation, where technology acts as a direct tool substitute with functional improvements. Often students will be asked to collaborate in science class on various projects. And in this day and age, many of those collaborative projects will be done in the virtual world, utilizing tools like PowerPoint, Keynote, Google Slides, all right? And particularly with Google Slides, students are now able to collaborate, all right, on this document in real time, whether they're in school or out of school. And so this is a step up from substitution. Remember, in substitution, we said, all right, students are taking notes or teachers are sharing their notes, all right, no big deal. Well, now we're going to kick it up a notch here with augmentation, where students are able to collaborate and modify and edit to make sense of their learning. Another great part of augmentation is the speech-to-text capability. So now students can take a tool like Google Docs, for example, and they can speak into that document, and the document will type for them. That's pretty powerful, particularly for some of your tough topics within science, whether students are taking notes or they're at home, taking notes or creating a project to get started, to get over that writer's block, to get over that initial stage of, all right, what am I going to do for my project? For students to be able to speak into their computers and for those computers to capture what they're saying will definitely spur students' thought process and to get them going in the right direction. And then taking it a step further here with these projects, all right, students, if they're working on PowerPoint or Keynote or Google Slides, they can embed hyperlinks, they can embed videos, images, and other enhancements to extend their learning, graphic organizers, those sorts of things, not only to enhance their learning experience, but if they are collaborating with others, obviously to enhance their learning experiences. But then, often they're going to present their projects, and they need to be able to convey that information in a way where their peers can understand what it is they're learning about in that particular science class. And so it's important that in this multimedia world that we live in, that students, when they share out this information, they make it engaging, they make it relevant, so that their classmates can understand what it is they're learning about. Moving on to modification, the M of the SAMR model. And this is where technology allows for significant task redesign. All right, and what we have here, let's look at assessment. All right, and reimagining, what assessment is all about. Okay, it's not just your multiple choice test anymore. There's so many ways that students can leverage the power of technology to make sense of the learning, to show what they know at a high level. And it goes back to, again, autonomy, choice, those sorts of things. When students are presented with autonomy and choice, they often will rise to the occasion, particularly in science class. Science is such an interesting subject that there's just so many tremendous things that students can learn about and share with others. And there's some great tools out there in the educational technology world that students can use, or that teachers can use to put students in situations where they're successful when being assessed. And one example here is a blog. And a blog is what can be found on the World Wide Web, and basically often contains perspective from the writer on a particular topic, and it can be as short or as long as the writer wants it to be. And the great thing about blogs is it can be shared out through different social media channels, different websites, what have you. They can include videos and images and things along those lines. And it really gives the student an opportunity to show what they know to an authentic audience. And you see here a little image of the letter T here. That's for the Tumblr blog. Tumblr is a website that you may want to explore or have your students explore, particularly your high school students. If you're concerned about the student safety online, another blog service that is free is KidBlog. All right, and we can really make sure on KidBlog that students are safe, but they can write for an authentic audience. And what I mean by that is that I think often students are reluctant or grow tired of just writing for themselves or for their teacher or for their parents. They really want to connect with their peers from maybe a different part of the school or a different part of the district, different part of the state, country, or even world. And blogs enable students to do that. And so they're studying a topic in life science class or in physics or in chemistry, and they find something really interested and they hone in on it and they write about it on their blog. Let them share it with others. When they share it with others, the others will give them really good feedback, and then that conversation continues, and it's really healthy. Another option is to have students create a podcast. Maybe you have a science podcast or a biology podcast or something along those lines, where students can record 5 to 10 minute sessions about a particular science topic. That's what we're talking about here. with modification. And a good tool for that is SoundCloud. SoundCloud is a great tool. So check it out. And students can even do it very simply on their device. You know, if they go into, say, for example, their iPhone or their iPad and they go into voice recording, they can record themselves speaking about a particular topic in science, and then they can email that or share it out through different channels with a few taps of the screen. It's not that big of a deal. So giving them the option to do that may be something to think about. A screencast, all right, here you see the letter S. That's for a app or extension that is called Snagit, S-N-A-G-I-T, Snagit. And what Snagit does, it once downloaded, for example, from the Chrome store as an extension or app, it will record everything that's on your screen, which is pretty neat. And so you can do a whole screencast using different tools on your computer to show what you know about a particular science topic. And one last example with modification, and move on to redefinition. You know, I see it all the time in our hallways and things. And kids are just, you know, using their devices, their cell phones and things, to shoot video, then edit, and then share. Okay, they create their own movies, their own trailers, and this can be applied to the field of science, to the different science classes, using tools like WeVideo or iMovie. To once they shoot the video, they can edit, and then they can share it out on YouTube or through email or different social media channels for people to see and to learn from. Often, you know, the research says that peers learn best from their peers, and so giving students the freedom to do that, I think it's pretty neat. Moving on to redefinition, the R of the SAMR model. This is where technology allows for the creation of a new task previously inconceivable. And the SAMR model, before we get into the revision a little bit more, is really a framework, something that can really bolster the teacher's ability to teach with technology and students' ability to learn with technology. And I really suggest that you think about, if not for this year, maybe you want to pilot this year, but definitely for next year, make that a part of your school culture, right? Because technology is not going away. You know, in most cases, students are bringing in their own devices, or schools are providing a device for students, and students have access to devices at all times of the school day, and even when they go home. And so we really need to focus on, you know, how are they going to be most successful and learning at a high level with technology. So the redefinition, technology allows for creation of a new task previously inconceivable. And so what we have here is really the teacher putting students in a situation with the use of technology, pushing them to new levels. All right. I was in a classroom the other day, a science class. Students were doing a biology project on DNA, and they presented their project, and they had designed and created a DNA extraction tool on one of our 3D printers. All right, so that's pretty cool. So if you have 3D printers sitting there in your school, or you're thinking about purchasing one, they really can enhance the science curriculum, science lessons, units of study, and for any subject area for that matter. And so a tool that you can use to design different artifacts and things is Tinkercad. It's a free resource. It's downloaded onto your computer that is hooked up to your 3D printer. You go ahead and design and print. And I think that one of the rules that you need to have is that students can only print if they design, because there's a lot of stuff out there where it's already designed for you and all you need to do is print it out. You know, I don't think that's really teaching students much. Maybe if you're just trying to get used to it, that's fine. But there's also other applications. So if you draw something on a piece of paper related to science, say for example a dinosaur or something along those lines, that can be, you can take a picture of that, upload it to Tinkercad, and then it can be printed out on a 3D printer. So that's, you're still designing it, you're drawing it, and then you're actually incorporating art now with science. So that's something to think about. Another way that students can redefine learning experiences in science class is to create a website or an app. It's so easy to do this now. And for those students that are really interested in app design or website design, why give them that option, to create a website or an app to show what they know. The MIT App Creator, if you check that out, MIT App Creator gives students a chance to create their own apps, something that might be beneficial. Students can also interact with scientists and people in the field of science through mystery Skypes or through Google Hangouts. All right, use these video tools to bring people to your classroom virtually. Often you'll have the career days where people will come in from the field of science and talk to kids. That's great, but when we can't do that, leveraging the power of a tool like Skype or Google Hangout to bring them in. Now, Mystery Skypes really helped out with the lower elementary kids, because then, so not only are they interacting with a person in the field of science, but then they also play a little game with them where they have to figure out where in the world they are speaking from, which is kind of integrating social studies and those different types of communication skills and things. So it's pretty cool. Google Earth is a tool that you can do so much with in terms of the physical science and just learning about different things related to science and also related to social studies and things along those lines. Student created lessons use a tool like BlendSpace. BlendSpace allows the teacher or the student to create an online lesson with ease, and then share it out and have others learn from it as well. You can integrate different tools, different videos and images and links, and kind of like build a little lesson online that can be shared. So you're kind of like flipping a learning experience for students. And then obviously you have your online science labs. I'll talk about a few of those later on. Students can create their own, or there's definitely resources out there where students can come across that and again redefine their learning. So that's the SAMR model, and that kind of ties into the next part of this webinar, looking at the National Education Technology Plan, or the NETP. So let's get into this here. The National Education Technology Plan, NETP, sets a national vision and plan for learning enabled by technology through building on the work of leading education researchers, district, school, and higher education leaders, classroom teachers, developers, entrepreneurs, and nonprofit organizations. The principles and examples provided in the document align to the activities to support the effective use of technology of Every Student Succeeds Act, as authorized by Congress in December 2015. So this has been around for about 6 months or so, and it's broken up into 5 different parts. All right, Section 1 looks at learning, Section 2 teaching, Section 3 leadership, Section 4 assessment, Section 5 infrastructure. Again, all pertaining to technology integration. All right, so you couple this, the National Education Technology Plan, with the SAMR model, and then you're really building a robust framework or structure to go off of as you look to integrate the next generation science standards in this world of technology. All right, so that's something we got to constantly keep in mind. Not only do we want students to learn science, but they need to learn science utilizing technology. So what is the NET impact on the next generation science standards? The conversation has now shifted from whether technology should be used in learning. Can you remember that, from 5, 10, 15 years ago, to now how can it improve learning to ensure that all students have access to high quality educational experiences. This ties into the mission of Next Generation Science Standards. It relates to technology enhancing learning experiences in science classes. So let's get into this here. Section 1 of the NETP looks at learning, all right? And the goal of Section 1, again, this is like a 120-page document, the National Education Technology Plan. I boiled it down into a couple slides here, and I'll share with you a link at the end of this webinar. You can get into it a little bit more, print it out, look at it, what have you. The goal of Section 1 is that all learners will have an engaging and empowering learning experiences in both formal and informal settings that prepare them to be active, creative, knowledgeable, and ethical participants in our globally connected society. So when I think of this, and I think of the Next Generation Science Standards, some things came to mind here that I have down here in the bullets. 3D printing. All right, that's an engaging sort of thing. It's relevant now. It's cool. It's something that students can design, they can print out, they can touch, they can help it with enhancing their learning experiences. We recently received a flight simulator. These are becoming less expensive now. And you talk about STEM and looking at science, technology, engineering, mathematics, learning how to fly a plane and what it takes and those sorts of things. That's all about science. Maker spaces. This year we are doing a pilot of makerspace in 6th grade, and I've learned about different maker spaces around the country. Just having a place in your school where students can come to tinker, to build, to create without worrying about grades or low stress, just having fun. Something that you want to think about to get kids excited about building and learning how things work and that sort of thing. Robotics, and people are taking things a step further with robotics. Lego robotics and those sorts of things. And these kits that come pre-made, and you can buy them and bring them to your school. Really makes it fun for kids to learn about how robots work, and the function of robots in society, and how it can help us learn about different subjects like science. And that interdisciplinary approach. All right. I know the Next Generation Science Standards touch upon this, and students understanding that connection that science has not only within science, but within language arts and social studies and mathematics and those sorts of things. And leverage the power of tech so that students own their learning in science class. That's the whole thing here. I just shared with you some ideas, some resources. I'm going to continue to do that over the next 10 or 15 minutes. Leverage the power of technology so that students can own their learning in science class. That's what we want them to do. We should never be working harder than our students during class. Now, maybe preparing and maybe after class, but during class, students need to own their learning. Section 2 of the National Education Technology Plan looks at teaching. And the goal here is educators will be supported by technology that connects them to people, data, content, resources, expertise, and learning experiences that can empower and inspire them to provide more effective teaching for all learners. Okay, we're looking here at personal learning networks, which we'll get into at next week's webinar. The idea of social media connecting with like-minded educators to reflect, to learn, to share, those sorts of things. That falls under the umbrella of personal learning networks. We'll get into that again next week. Digital curriculum. All right, this is a huge part of the Next Generation Science Standards, National Education Technology Plan. Having that digital curriculum that is kind of like a live document that changes as things change, as they always do in the world of education and learning. Making sure we have that digital curriculum available to not only our teachers, but to students on their devices as easy as possible, as simple as possible. The flipped learning experience, leveraging the power of technology to kind of change the way students learn, the way teachers teach. So maybe homework isn't homework anymore, maybe classwork isn't classwork anymore. Those sorts of things are flipped based upon the technology that you have in front of you. The paperless workflow, I think, is critical. Tools like Google Classroom, Google Docs, even with Microsoft, using Microsoft, those products, make the paperless workflow easier. All right, so we're cutting down on paper, but we're still learning at a high level and handing in assignments virtually. And these autonomous learning environments, I think, are critical, where students are able to learn, where teachers are able to learn, and really focus on their passions and really let that translate to the classroom. Because if the teachers are passionate, kids are passionate, administrators are passionate, teachers are passionate, students, it's a trickle-down effect. Leadership is a huge part of the National Education Technology Plan, and the goal here is to embed an understanding of technology-enabled education within the roles and responsibilities of education leaders at all levels, and set state, regional, and local visions for technology and learning. You look at PLCs. I think it's important that school leaders follow this model with the professional learning communities, science teachers getting together, having the time to get together to make sense of the next generation science standards, to plan and collaborate on lessons and units of study that integrate technology, that connect with the next generation science standards. You look at having instructional coaches. Since we're focusing on technology here, ed tech coaches, to make sure that science teachers are supported as they roll out these new lessons and units of study that pertain to the next generation science standards. It's critical that they have that support. And school leaders, really getting behind teachers attending their local, state, and regional educational events. It's important to do that. And also, science teachers must be given a voice as they, as districts plan for their professional development sessions, particularly, in grades 6 to 12 with the next generation science standards. We need to have a voice. Teachers need to have a voice as districts prepare for next year, and making sure that there's time and that sort of thing as we move forward with educational technology and the next generation science standards. Section 4 of the National Education Technology Plan looks at assessment. All right, and at all levels, our education system will leverage the power of technology to measure what matters and use assessment data to improve learning. All right, and how can students be assessed in their science classes with the assistance of technology? There's various tools that can be used here. Okay, and so what we have here is some tools that I want to show you really quick. All right, and one of those is Plickers. All right, Plickers is a great tool to utilize for assessment purposes, either before the lesson begins, during the lesson, or just after the lesson. Okay, and it actually only requires one piece of technology, and that is your smartphone. Okay, and you can see here in this image, once you visit plickers.com. All right, so say you're in a science class, and say that you wanted to, assess students' knowledge of what they just learned about, related to tectonic plates or what have you in their science class. And they come into class, you hand out these placards. You can see these little placards with these symbols on them. All right, and these symbols represent, depending on how they're held, different answers. And on the screen, you project a series of questions. And as the questions are projected, the students hold up their placards a certain way. And as they do that, the teacher scans the room with their device. And as they scan the room, it kind of records the information there. And so that's what we have with Plickers. So check that out. It's a great way to collect data. We talk about formative assessment, and it really only requires one device, which is pretty cool. So that's one way you can kind of change things up there with technology in your science class. Kahoot is a game-based assessment tool. Many of you have probably utilized Kahoot. It's free. Again, all these tools are free, and basically, Kahoot um, will enable you to, as you can see here, um, the teacher creates, or the student can create their own game on Kahoot. Um, and then the kids will be pushed out to the students in the class. The questions will be projected on the screen. Students pick the different answers, and it collects the data, and the kids have a good time playing. So a tool like Kahoot can really help you out. Other tools, Flipgrid, Poll Everywhere. I know everybody knows about Poll Everywhere, but they have a newer component to it called the word cloud generator. So that's something that they can use as well. And EduCanon is an interactive video lesson where you take a video, a science video, for example, and you can, at various points in time throughout that video, embed questions. And it can be done in class where the students watch the video and answer questions at various points of the video, or they can do it at home for homework. And once the students answered, they submit their answers to those questions, and then on the back end, the teachers can see that data and use that data to impact instruction. Real-time data embedded in assessments are imperative if we're really going to help kids out, particularly in science class. It's really important. And then finally, Section 5 of the National Education Technology Plan deals with infrastructure. And the goal here is that all students and educators have access to a robust and comprehensive infrastructure when and where they need it for learning. All right. So what we just went over in sections 1 through 4, none of that is possible, right, if we don't have the proper infrastructure in place. So if we're going to have a successful science class that utilizes devices and utilizes different apps and web tools, we need to make sure that our infrastructure is robust, and that if there is any issue, that they're able to be rectified in a short time frame, and that students have continuous access to devices, to Wi-Fi, and those sorts of things. As we wind down here, we have a few more minutes. I want to get into the next generation science standard and some educational technology tools, across disciplines. So we're looking at, where does science pop up in other disciplines, okay? Or how does other disciplines pop up in science class? One tool that's great is Newsela, all right? And, you talk about current events and students being able to read about science. Newsela does an outstanding job of taking these science topics, or any topics for any subject area, and breaking them down for students based on reading level. Okay, so for example, let's look at this article here on Yosemite's granite cliffs. All right, for your high school students, maybe this is the Great Lexile level, 1150. Or maybe you want to make this long article, shorter, easier to read for students. So you just click on the different levels, and you can see here it modifies the article, and then modifies it even more. Okay, depending on the type. We all know that we have different levels of students, different levels of readers in science class, and so we need to make sure that we exhaust all options to promote their success. And from a reading standpoint, a current event standpoint, Newsela is a great tool to use in science class for that. Now there's a free version and a paid version. You can write about the different topics if you sign in and sign up, and you can also quiz. And I think the paid version, the quiz, you can take the quiz, but then to get the data to those quizzes, you need to pay for it. But it's well worth it. Newsela, check it out. And then we're going to go back into the presentation here as we wind down. some other things you may want to consider. Video notes is if you're a Google Apps for Education district, you can download it. It will connect to your Google account and basically allow you to take notes. So say you're watching a video in class, in science class, a YouTube video, and as you're watching it, you're taking notes on like a Google Doc or within Video Notes itself. It'll copy those notes into your Google Drive. So Video Notes, yes, it is spelled correctly. That's the name of the website. You're looking at math and science. Wolfram Alpha has a tremendous amount of resources related to science and mathematics. So you look at astronomy, you can look at life sciences, those sorts of things. You click on earth science, for example, and you look at earthquakes, and you want to get information on earthquakes. So I click on earthquakes, and it'll bring up some information here related to earthquakes and what they're all about, and the different data points and things related. So you talk about this math portion of science. Wolfram Alpha gives you all that information. Look at the magnitude of the earthquakes and where they take place, the data related to that, and breaking it down from a math perspective. So you're looking at that link between math and science. Wolfram Alpha is a tremendous resource and will help students understand the connection much more clearly, utilizing technology between math and science. And as we said before, Google Earth, with social studies and science, a great tool to use as well. Some of your top-notch next generation science standards and EdTech resources. I want to show you the Graphite Next Generation Explorer. All right, this is a tool brought to you by Common Sense Media. The Next Generation Science Standard Explorer breaks it down by grade level, and what it does is it not only breaks down the standards by grade level, but it gives you apps and websites pertaining to that particular standard in that particular grade level. So for example, I click on grade 5, and I'm going to look at the different things that kids are going to learn about in grade 5. I'm trying to look for some apps or websites or online programs that would help students enhance their learning experience in grade 5 science. I'm going to click on Earth and Human Activity, and I see here it gives me the standard number, the performance, the performance expectation for that particular standard, obtain and combine information about ways individual communities use science ideas to protect the science, Earth's resources and environment. There are 20 products, so I click on the link for the 20 products, and it brings me to apps that are rated, websites that are rated related to this particular Earth and Human Activity and the performance expectation. And look at all these different apps. Some are paid apps, some are free, and it just gives you a wealth of resources that can be utilized by students to enhance their learning of science, not only in school, but outside of school. And they're all related. Many are related by teachers and other users of the Common Sense Graphite Explorer. And you can go through this for kindergarten through high school. So it's a pretty neat resource. Check it out. Common Sense Graphite Next Generation Science Explorer. One other tool I want to show you is the Class Tech Tips by Monica Burns. Let me go back here for a moment. Monica Burns has a blog called Class Tech Tips, and every day she pushes out a blog post on an app that can be utilized by the teacher in the classroom and by students. And the other day she pushed out a blog post on the periodic table. All right, so we're going to click on this blog post here. And for those of you who use iPads in your science classrooms, she's telling us here that there's an app um, that's called the Elements Periodic Table app from TouchPress. And she goes into the different features of this app and how it can be used in science class. All right, and it also leads to her Teachers Pay Teachers lesson plan site, and you can actually buy the lesson. But you can kind of get an idea of what the app is all about here based on her blog post. Monica does a tremendous job not only pushing out blog posts related to science apps, but math apps, language arts, what have you. And I have a few others here that you can look into later on. Finally, here's my works cited page. I provide links here to the different next generation science standard websites, the actual National Education Technology Plan, and the SAMR model for you to look at as well. The next webinar will be Tuesday, April 12th at 4 Eastern, where I'll look at personal learning networks and the next generation science standards. This will look at how you can leverage the power of social media to grow as a science educator. Tools like Twitter, Facebook, Open Ed resources, Voxer, Instagram, Pinterest. How can you use those tools, those networking experiences in social media, on social media, to better yourself as a science educator? That'll be next week's webinar. There are some professional growth opportunities for you in the coming weeks and months. The second annual Tomorrow's Classrooms Today conference will take place on May 21st at Rider University. There's a new book out there, and again, we're going to talk about personal learning networks, in particular Twitter next week. There's my new book, 140 Twitter Tips for Educators. You can buy that on Amazon. We also offer my company, Evolving Educators, Next Generation Science Standards and EdTech training. We also have Summer of Making events and Google Apps for Education training. You can find more about this by visiting www.evolvingeducators.com. Here is the link to the presentation, and I imagine there's going to be an archive as well to this webinar at a later date. But if you go to this Google form, write down this web address, fill it out, and we'll send you the link to this presentation. This is the shortened version of the link, so I'll give you a moment to write that down. And as you're writing it down, I want to thank you for being on this webinar for the last 60 minutes. I hope you can take some things back with you to your classroom, schools, and districts to make sense of and prepare for the implementation of the next generation science standards. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at brad.curry@gmail.com. And again, I thank you for joining me today. I'll leave this link to the presentation up for a few moments, and have a great day.